And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could my aging mother still pass out candy on Halloween if she speaks in frequencies only animals can hear? And would the Salvation Army accept my old VCR as a donation if it doubles as an art piece entitled Tomb of the Goldfish? And now, the podcast host whose youthful, chiseled body doesn't look a day over 46 years old, Pete Dominic.
Yes, Pico, another great, bizarrely hilarious opening. Thank you very much. Yes, indeedly do. 46 and chiseled, feeling great. Hello and welcome to the Monday, November 1st episode of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. Welcome to November 2021. Excited to be with you as we head into the dark winter months and continue to communicate and talk and get to know each other and learn about the world together. Thank you, as always, for your support. We begin a new month. I begin a new year. Turned 46 yesterday. Thank you to all of you who wished me happy birthday. I mean, there was just so much. It was just, listen, I got so many fine people out there that care about me and know I exist. Facebook and Twitter and emails and texts and Marco Polo app messages and you name it. Thank you very much. But no, very thoughtful, very kind. And if you didn't wish me happy birthday, you still have an opportunity. There's another 24 hours to get your belated happy birthday. I'm 46, talking about my birthday. I hope you had a good Halloween as well. But the big note, I got to say, I'm still waiting for Julia's note. But Ava did give me a wonderful note on my birthday. And I bring it up because I love to share things about parenting and my kids here whenever possible. And you think about, she's now 16, she'll be 17 in January. And you think about what you want, who you want to be in your life. Do you? Do you think about that? I think about it a lot. Who are you? What have you accomplished for other people, for the world? What are you doing? I don't know. I think a lot about those things, but really, I think about them more than anything else from the perspective of what kind of dad am I to these girls. That's mostly what I think about. It's something I focus in terms of who I want to be, right? I focus a lot on and try to learn how to be a better dad to them and try to communicate with them and just have as healthy and positive and honest relationship with them as I can. And yesterday, I got a note that was basically like the Academy Award, I felt like of all the things that I've done in my career, in my personal life, any of my personal or professional accomplishments, and I did win the MVP in summer camp 1990 for lacrosse. Played goalie. I was pretty unstoppable. But letter from Ava was just so, well, credit to Val, my wife, for instilling this kind of tradition of writing thoughtful notes to each other on our birthdays. We write them to the girls. They write them usually to us. That was Val's doing in tradition. Always loved that. But it was so reaffirming and rewarding, the things that she said. It's so deeply personal, and obviously it's between her and I, but she said all the things that I would want her to believe and would hope that the role that I played for her in her life. And she did talk about how close we've gotten this year, especially, and we've always been close, but it was just so wonderful. And I hope that if you have kids that are younger, that you can have the type of relationship that I do. And if your kids are grown up, I hope that my relationship is like the one that you've had. Many of you have given me great advice over the years, so I really value it so much, by the way. And I always love sharing my parenting experiences, what I've learned, and always happy to do that with you and love talking about it. Email me and we'll talk, and always talking on the show. standupwithpete@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to tell you what I think I've done right and what I think I've done wrong. I want to keep talking about that. But boy, was it amazing. Just so nice. And I'm so happy right now as I'm out here in the shed putting together the show for you, which is a great show. I'm very excited to have Gregory Zuckerman, who's a Wall Street Journal reporter, but more importantly for our conversation today, the author of the inside story of the search for a COVID-19 vaccine. It's called A Shot to save the world. He joins me to talk about this new book. It's just come out. It's great. And then I've got two amazing women who are activists and doing great work at their organizations, which work together. They reached out to me, and I'm very happy to have, for the first time, Gabby Goldstein of Sister District, and welcome back to the conversation, Amanda Litman of runforsomething.org. Two great organizations working together to bring attention to the elections which take place across our country tomorrow. There's no such thing as an off-year election, folks. That's, I think, one of the main messages they want to get across. I hope you're doing work and whatever you can in your local and elections and anywhere else that you're contributing. I think I'm going to try to do some phone banking for Virginia, as inspired by those two ladies in our conversation that you'll hear today. Gabby Goldstein and Amanda Litman. Also, Greg Zuckerman, of course, before that. Really happy with those conversations and can't wait to have you hear them. But right now, I do want to get to the news. I hope you had a great weekend. I certainly did. It was busy. I did shows Friday night at the Comedy Club Levity Live with a great comedian named Liza Traeger. Then Saturday, hung out with Val. We watched that movie Aretha, the biopic on Aretha Franklin, which we really enjoyed. And then yesterday, of course, my birthday, but also warmed up the audience for John Oliver Tonight on HBO. So if you watched that episode, the audience is great because of me, not because of the super talented writing staff, production staff, and of course the winner of many awards, John Oliver. No, I take full credit for that. Now, it was great, a lot of fun, busy weekend. I hope you had a great weekend, and I'm very happy to have you joining me today and any day. If you're not a subscriber, standupwithpete.com. By the way, Thursday night we had a great hangout. A lot of listeners showed up. We had a great conversation, a costume contest, a lot of fun. So let's get to it. It's time for the news from the weekend, the last 24, everybody. Let's start with some sound. Of course, a lot to talk about over the weekend. The president is traveling. He saw the Pope. He is at the G20. He's going to head over to the climate negotiations, and lots being reported on that. The FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine for kids age 5 to 11. Supreme Court declined to block the Maine vaccine mandates in the state of Maine. I mean, the courts are not blocking these mandates, so that means they're saying they're constitutional. So when you scream about taking your freedoms and your constitution, well, the courts, as far as I've seen, maybe I've missed it. Has any court said that the mandates are unconstitutional at any level? Let me know. And communism and socialism and whatever else you want to say, Joe Biden killing the economy. And we know this now because Wall Street finished its best month this year with new records. The S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the NASDAQ all gained on Friday to close Wall Street's best month this year at record highs. Also, the U.S. and European Union, reached a deal easing steel and aluminum tariffs that were imposed by former president, the former guy, and lots more to talk about. I'll get to some more of these kind of rapid-fire headlines in the news dump. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Mara Quint is not here. She usually joins us on Monday for Mara Mondays, but we couldn't make the schedule work. She'll be back next week. Always love when we kick off the week with her. But I also like to talk on Mondays or the beginning of the week at some point, give you a little COVID news update. Some COVID news. Yeah, thank you, Pete Coe. All right, well, I mentioned the FDA reaching a decision on the Pfizer vaccine, of course. But the national outlook has improved considerably since early September, according to New York Times. Fewer than half as many cases are being identified each day, and tens of thousands of fewer coronavirus patients are hospitalized. Case levels are flat or falling in more than 40 states, though trouble spots continue to emerge in parts of the West. Alaska leads the country in recent cases per capita, while Colorado has the fastest rate of case growth. Florida, which experienced one of the worst summer surges, now has lower recent case rate because everybody's dead that could get it. COVID couldn't find any more hosts. No, they now have their, that's not true, lower recent case rate than every other state. And caseloads continue to fall rapidly across much of the South, which is good news because they were really spiking. Reports of deaths have continued to decline to around 1,400 a day from more than 2,000 a day during parts of September. More than 743,000 total deaths have been linked to COVID-19 in the United States. About 2/3 of Americans aged 12 and older are fully vaccinated. Time to get your booster if you haven't. I haven't checked to see when I qualify. I probably do pretty soon. But also should mention, as I read those stats, from those stats that there are so many more side effects, as we learned from my wife on last Monday's episode. Losing your sense of smell and taste, the fogginess, depression, all kinds of other things. I hear it lingers in your penis. I read that sentence one. Lingers in your penis. Is that still, was that true? Look that one up. You don't want it, is the point. You don't want to get it. So get vaccinated and do your best to be safe. So that is the main COVID news. But I do have a few clips that I want to play for you on the subject, including over on CBS, Face the Nation, where anchor Margaret Brennan had Dr. Claire Bugard, the medical director of the COVID vaccine program at Children's National Hospital, on the program. She expresses confidence in the Pfizer vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11 following the FDA's authorization this week.
So your hospital participated in this trial of the Pfizer vaccine for children. You saw what happened. Did you have any concerns?
No, I think this is all really good news. What the independent advisory panel and the FDA looked at last week was really good science. They didn't skip any steps in this process. And the best news, both professionally, as someone who wants to take care of my patients, but also as a mom of a 6-year-old, is that this is awesome. There are no serious side effects given this lower dose of the vaccine to this lower group of kids, and it still protects kids from getting the infection.
Margaret Brennan also asked her expert doctor the following question about any concerns she has about the mRNA vaccine.
So this type of technology, the mRNA vaccine, you don't have any misgivings about giving it to someone who's young and developing?
No, not at all. Vaccines, all they do is they give your body a chance to build a response to something that's non-harmful so it can protect you against something that is harmful. And everything is risk-benefit. If there was no coronavirus in the country, well, we wouldn't be talking about a vaccine, right? But instead, there's this life-threatening disease floating around our communities. And in order to protect us, this is the safest, most effective way to do so.
Okay, well, that is your COVID news. All right, let's get to some of the other sound I've got for you from the weekend. Here is the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, who is asked about gas prices, which are up across the country. And, of course, they're based on the oil market. I just love the way that she communicates. I've always loved Jennifer Granholm since I saw her at a women's rights, reproductive rights rally in the middle of Washington, D.C. She's, of course, the former governor of Michigan. I think she's an effective communicator. I worked with her at CNN as well. I really like her. Here she is explaining the reason for high gas prices.
The gas prices, of course, are based upon a global oil market. That oil market is controlled by a cartel. That cartel is OPEC. OPEC controls more than 50% of the petroleum supply and more than 90% of the petroleum reserves. So that cartel has more say about what is going on. Now, on top of it, you've got oil and gas industry that can't flip a switch after coming out of a pandemic in the same way that you're seeing with the supply chains.
Yeah, she's very good on those shows, and she's doing, I think, a good job as the energy secretary. All right, let's jump over to, this is on ABC's The Week. It's Congressman Adam Kinzinger announced that he will not seek re-election. He's a Republican and from Illinois, one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach President Donald Trump over the January 6th Capitol attack. He announced this on Friday that he wouldn't run for re-election. He, along with Liz Cheney, one of the 2 Republicans in the House Select Committee investigating the insurrection by a mob of Trump supporters. He said Congress was too bitterly divided to work together in a civil manner with, quote, little to no desire to bridge our differences.
The Republican establishment now, whether it's the NRCC, whether it's Kevin McCarthy, have held on to Donald Trump. They have continued to breathe life into him. And so actually, it's not really handing a win as much to Donald Trump as it is to the cancerous kind of lie and conspiracy, not just wing anymore, but mainstream argument of the Republican Party. This is not on, the 10 of us that voted to impeach. It's not on Liz Cheney and I to save the Republican Party. It's on the 190 Republicans who haven't said a dang word about it, and they put their head in the sand and hope somebody else comes along and does something.
Yeah, that's well laid out. I mean, today's Republican Party is the party of Trump. It's a cult. Conspiracy theories and white supremacists and people who will believe just about anything if their favorite trusted media person or former president is telling them. And I think Adam Kinzinger lays it out quite well. It's pretty upsetting and pretty terrifying that there are 2 kind of wings of today's Republican Party. The extreme conservatives like Liz Cheney and a few others, and then those who are not living in reality that are saying, at least on the record, that there was some question about the election, including Sean Spicer, who is, for some reason, on Real Time with Bill Maher. No reason to have that guy be on anywhere, especially to help him sell his book. But that didn't stop the folks over at HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. But it didn't stop Bill Maher from embarrassing him either. I still would have been against the booking. Don't need to platform the guy, but, well, here it is.
Yes. What about the election was rigged and Trump really won? Is that
I think
lunacy?
there are some serious problems with the election.
Here we go.
No, time out. Hold on.
What?
Name when you look at Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada,
yes.
The idea that we changed rules running up to an election in terms of how a ballot was counted, when it was counted. Do you think Pennsylvania, the law signed by a Democratic governor in 2019, Act 77, signed by Governor Wolf, said that all ballots had to be in by 8 p.m.
There was a pandemic. That's why they
changed the law.
There was no time to do that.
No, there's never a time. So you should just take it.
Well, you would have. No, there wasn't. There wasn't.
There was plenty of time to pass legislation in all of these other areas.
This is a rabbit hole you want to go down to avoid the question.
No.
Did Trump win or lose the election?
I don't know.
Well, there you go.
Because
the world does.
I wish Sean Spicer was not on the show, but that is exactly the best response. Well, there you go. I've said that so many times. There it is. There you go. Because as soon as they show who they are, you have to believe them and not have them on your shows anymore. Okay, well, let's switch to a Democrat. Here is Congressman Ro Khanna. Here he is on CBS's Face the Nation talking about the congressional negotiations, which we may have a vote on early this week.
And that's the question. Why isn't there a single Republican who's for paid family leave? I mean, I heard you say, paid family leave's out. Why is there no one asking the Republicans? They claim to be the working class party. They're not with us on paid family leave.
So do you actually think things like paid family leave are not possible to pass after 2022 if you don't hold on to the majority? I mean, some people are saying, we'll get to it later. When you were meeting with the president behind closed doors, did he say to you, I can get paid family leave passed in the next year?
He said he will do everything he can on paid family leave and on community college.
Before 2022.
He will do what he can. But
yeah, well, that remains to be seen, of course. And here is Senator Bernie Sanders on CNN's State of the Union with Dana Bash, who's trying to negotiate the deal with him on TV, but he doesn't bite.
Will you support the framework as it currently stands, what the White House released at the end of the week?
Well, all I will tell you is we have a very, very strong bill, and it deals with the fact that we are going to start paying attention to the needs of working parents, continue that $300. We're going to build affordable housing. We're going to make sure that elderly people and people with disabilities can stay at home rather than be forced into a nursing home, etc. We're going to demand that the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes.
So sounds like that's a yes. If you're not successful, you will support it.
It's a very good bill. No, but I am right now. I can tell you, I worked yesterday, we're working today, we're going to work tomorrow to strengthen that bill. It is outrageous that we continue to pay the highest.
Oop, what happened, Bernie? Senator Sanders? Did you get cut off? I don't know. Was that my fault? Keith, did you do that? Here's more from Senator Sanders.
Unfortunately, we do not have one Republican who is prepared to take on the pharmaceutical industry, take on the private health insurance companies. Not one Republican prepared to go forward to deal with the crisis of climate. Not one Republican prepared to say to the richest people and largest corporations they're going to have to pay their fair share of taxes. So we're down to 50 people.
And Republicans have finally convinced themselves that they are the aggrieved minority. We are the ones who are being targeted with racism. It's us. We're the victims because we are teaching white kids in schools to hate themselves and be ashamed of themselves and that they're lesser than black students, which, of course, are theories that live in a think tank called the Manhattan Institute and just completely made up in so many ways as a result of a twisted interpretation of what was happening in our schools. Anyway, it's taken off. Even former Vice President Mike Pence, who is so stone cold stupid with zero pride and no integrity, he, of course, jumped on this and went to Virginia to help campaign for the dickhead that is running there, Glenn Youngkin, who apparently very well might win. Anyway, Mike Pence went there and said this stupidity.
Critical race theory is nothing more than state-sponsored racism, and it should be opposed by every American of every race and creed and color in every school in our land.
God, I hate the way he gives a speech. Like, his line is just like, you feel like you have to applaud because he delivers every line like it's the crescendo, the climax of the oratory that we're so blessed to be in his presence that he's giving the way he says it. I mean, he could say that about anybody could do that. I'm going to the grocery store with a list that is so long with healthy foods like lettuce and carrots and so much more. Shut up. You stink. Ooh, do I not like him. Okay, calm down, Pete. Come on, this is, you're letting him win. You're giving away your power. Let's get back to the news. Hurry, I need a palate cleanser. I need something nice. Okay, here's Dana Bash being sweet at the end of her interview with the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Before I let you go, it is Halloween. Did the twins have a costume or costumes?
So, my husband Chasten found these, it's a little hard to describe, but basically they're like these traffic cone they're infrastructure, basically. They're going to be going as infrastructure.
Oh, that's sweet. He dresses his little baby up like a traffic cone. How nice. Okay, well, let's get back to that Virginia election. Here's former governor who wants to be the future governor, Democrat Terry McAuliffe, laying out, I think, a pretty cogent explanation about how our kids should be learning in school.
I love Millie and Jack McAuliffe, my parents, but they should not have been picking my math or science book. We have experts who actually do that. And look what happened. He is closing his campaign on banning books. It's created a controversy all over the country. He wants to ban Toni Morrison's book, Beloved. So he's going after one of the most preeminent African-American female writers in American history, won the Nobel Prize as Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he wants her books banned. Now, of all the hundreds of books you could look at, why did you take the one black female author? Why did you do it? He's ending his campaign on a racist dog whistle, just like he started the campaign.
All right, there you go. That is Terry McAuliffe in the closing couple of days, last 48 hours for the Virginia election. And that is, I think, where most of us are most concerned if you are in any way on the Democrat, liberal, progressive, left end of the spectrum. Don't want to lose Virginia. Big state. A lot of consequences there. All right, let's get a little perspective on media. Here is writer Andrew Sullivan calling out Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. While on Fox News, I don't agree with his analysis, and I will tell you why.
You say, and you've been writing about polarization making things work. Quoting you, on the left, moderation is portrayed as a surrender to white nationalism, and on the right, white identity politics has overwhelmed moderate conservatism. So are we screwed, to use the technical term, and how much are the media fueling this polarization?
Well, I think they, like Facebook, are fueling it to some extent. I think the fact that you can be, and forgive me, on Fox News and never really hear a solid counter opinion, and the same goes for MSNBC and increasingly CNN, which I can't watch. It's basically the same as MSNBC now, means that you don't have a range of views for people to judge. And inevitably, when you all agree around roughly the same stuff, there's no ratchet back.
Yeah, okay. I can't with that. Fox News is absolutely in a world of its own. Do you disagree with me, folks? I'd love to have that discussion with anybody who disagrees with me. If you think they're, quote, all the same, they're all the same by the nature that they're all bad for a lot of different reasons, and that they're all corporate media who have to make millions of dollars of profits just to pay their own employees before anybody gets rich. Well, some people are obviously getting rich, but very few. But they're highly underpaid, folks that work in the vast majority of those networks. The idea, I just found that it's ridiculous. CNN and MSNBC, first of all, Fox News does have contrasting opinions most of the day. It's just that half the time they're debating whether or not Barack Obama was born in America, who won the election. I mean, just they're debating bullshit a lot, and they're making all kinds of terrible arguments, and they're not covering hard news. I don't know. I could just go on and on, but I just really disagreed with that. But I would love to have you in the shed right now to talk to me, but I don't, because I'm talking into this microphone alone, and I want to hear what you think. So let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com on that one. Anytime we talk about media analysis, I'm in for it. I love it. Love your thoughts. All right, so Joe Biden, the president of the United States, he was hanging out with the Pope over the weekend. Pope and Biden hanging out. Do you think the other Pope stopped by? I can't help. Every time I think about the Pope, I think that there's still two popes, and I just wonder what it's like when they walk by each other in the hallway. Pope. Anyway, President Biden said Friday after meeting with Pope Francis that the pontiff told him he was a good Catholic and should continue receiving communion, despite a push by conservative U.S. bishops to deny him the sacrament over his support for abortion rights. President Biden has met with Pope Francis 4 times, but this was his first such visit as president. And the two leaders talked at the Vatican about policy issues, including climate change and the coronavirus pandemic, as well as what President Biden described as personal things. President Biden gave the Pope a coin with the insignia of the National Guard unit of his late son, Beau Biden. And the Pope privately counseled Biden and his family after Beau Biden died of brain cancer in 2015. And here is, I thought this was interesting. Here's Joe Biden talking about his relationship with the Pope, the current Pope, not the last Pope. I don't think there was any talk about or to the last. I think the old Pope, what was his name? Benjamin? Bill? Bruce? Anyway, I think he was trying to get in. He was like, hello, can you guys let me in? I want to hang out with you guys. I was Pope too. Benedict, that's his name. Yeah, but Biden, Francis was like, get out of here, quitter. Anyway, here is President of the United States talking about Pope Francis.
When I won, he called me to tell me how much he appreciated the fact that I would focus on the poor and focus on the needs of people who are in trouble. So I just, again, I don't want to talk more about it because so much of it is personal, but he is everything I learned about Catholicism from the time I was a kid going from grade school through high school. I have great respect for people who have other religious views, but he's just a fine, decent, honorable man, and we keep in touch.
Well, there you go, President Biden and the Pope hanging out, and I thought that was nice, so I shared it with you. All right, finally, my friend Ali Velshi wrapping up the week on his Sunday program. Velshi talking about all those oil executives that were up on Capitol Hill, climate change, and, well, Velshi, take it away, buddy. 2 minutes to wrap up the last 24.
You could call it a crude awakening. Oil executives from Exxon, BP, Shell, and Chevron faced the ire of Democratic lawmakers on the Hill this week. The hearing marked the first time that the despots of diesel were directly questioned under oath, I might add, on the company's collective role in misleading the public on the causes of climate change. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, House Oversight Committee chairwoman, had major expectations for the hearing.
For far too long, big oil has escaped accountability for its central role in bringing our planet to the brink of a climate catastrophe. That ends today. Big oil has known the truth about climate change for decades.
True to their form, as slippery as an oil slick, the executives largely avoided the climate change allegations, instead emphasizing their support of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, something you may recall is not enforceable and does not require oil companies to actually lower emissions. And true to their form, Republican members of the committee defended the companies, calling the hearing theater, a distraction, and un-American. But in truth, the oil giants don't need GOP defenders because they're doing great all on their own. Business is booming for big oil. Exxon and Chevron both reported their most profitable quarterly earnings since before the onset of the pandemic just this week. As the saying goes, money talks. So if these companies ever felt a desire to diversify into renewable energy, they certainly don't now. This is billions upon billions of dollars drilling right into the Earth's crust sooner or later. This should be a call to action for Americans, and I don't mean keeping up with your recycling and carpooling when you can. While those things are crucial, they alone are not enough to stop climate change. It's time to stop blaming individuals and start holding the fossil fuel industry accountable for the major part that they have played in destroying our planet. Bringing these companies to task is the only shot we've got in saving this planet.
All right, well, that was excellent. Thank you very much, Ali Velshi. We will leave it there for the last 24 in terms of sound, but I do have a bunch more headlines I want to crowbar in before I get to my guest interview. So let's head over to the news dump.
Pete's Halloween headlines are bound to make you jump like chimpanzee eating face on today's news dump.
Oh my God. Yeah, for sure. The chimp would always make you jump if it was eating your face. Well done, Pico. At Pico VO for all your voiceover needs, folks, for all your jingle writing needs. I love it. All right, what have I got for you on today's news dump? Let's start with a couple of train accidents. One in England sounds like a major incident. At least 50 firefighters responding to an incident where two trains crashed Sunday afternoon in Salisbury, England. Major incident, like I said. No deaths have been reported, however, as of Sunday afternoon. However, there was a deadly train accident here in the U.S. 3 people were killed. 1 was injured in an Amtrak collision in South Carolina. Amtrak train collided with a vehicle just before 2:30 a.m., killing 3 and injuring 1. Car was located off the roadway with heavy damage near a stopped Amtrak train by police and firefighters, according to North Charleston Fire Department press release. Cause of the collision is currently unknown, according to NBC. Trains are still one of the safest ways to travel. I'd certainly take my risk on the rails over than driving or being in somebody else's car. Or you could fly, but don't fly on Southwest because they cancel a lot of flights. And apparently one of their pilots used the "Let's go Brandon" phrase, which is equivalent of "fuck you, Biden." Southwest Airlines saying it's conducting an internal investigation after one of its pilots used the phrase in the plane's public address system. Of course, it's become a stand-in for insulting the current president, and that was a pretty big story yesterday. That was an easy one to catch fire on social media. And oh no, a man died after bleeding to death after being gored in the leg by a bull during a festival in Spain, where the animals are released into the streets. A 55-year-old Spanish man. It was the last day of bull running following the goring on Saturday afternoon during the animal festival. You know, I do always root for the bulls. It's the first known death during a run into the bulls since the festival's return to many towns across Spain after a pandemic-imposed pause. What a way to go. Oh, did you hear what happened to Mateo? No, what happened? Oh, he got killed. He was running with the bulls and a bull got him. Really? That's how you want to go out? Really, it just can't be worth it. All right, what else do we have for you? This is a confusing headline, but the John Deere Company, farm equipment manufacturer Deere & Company, I don't think it's John Deere anymore anyway, they reached a tentative labor agreement Saturday with United Auto Workers Union, but the strike is continuing for now. The UAW strike that began October 14th continues. Details of the proposed contract are not being released while workers study the terms of the agreement in advance of the vote. PAC will cover more than 10,000 production and maintenance workers at 12 Deere sites in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas. Well, maybe it's time for me to head to Australia because they've begun easing international border rules in place since the start of the pandemic, as several international flights touched down in the country, and residents in certain Australian states were allowed to travel again, according to Reuters. Big celebration down under. The 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference has begun in Glasgow, England on Sunday. Hosts of the summit warning the lights are, quote, flashing red on the climate change dashboard, and I'll be covering it all of this week right here on Stand Up. So look for more news on that throughout the week. And that is all I've got for you on today's News Dump, brought to you by Quip, the electric toothbrush that everybody needs to get now. Get quip.com/standup. You got to take better care of your teeth. You know who I'm talking to you. And I got this toothbrush now, and I love it. And so go to getquip.com/standup. Help your teeth, help this show. Okay, so coming up, I've got two women joining me to talk about this week's elections and what you can still do to get out the vote. Really happy to have both the co-founders of Sister District and Run for Something, Amanda Litman and Gabby Goldstein, both joining me coming up for a conversation I think you're going to like. But first, I've got a really important author really important book that he has written called A Shot to Save the World, the inside story of the life or death race for a COVID-19 vaccine. And it's so important because it's all about the small group of unlikely and untested scientists, executives who they say have to save civilization. A New York Times best-selling author and award-winning Wall Street Journal investigative journalist writes it and joins me. I think you're really going to love him. Gregory Zuckman is my guest. He takes us in this book inside top-secret laboratories, corporate clashes, and high-stakes government negotiations that led to effective shots. So deeply reported, and it's really good. It's a good read. It's gripping and dramatic at times. It's a blow-by-blow chronicle of the most consequential scientific breakthrough of our time. Really happy to have Greg on the show for the first time. Gregory Zuckman. He is on Twitter at G Zuckerman, where I hope you'll reach out and tell him you heard him here, because it is his first time here on the show. And such an important book. I think you'll like our conversation. Here we go right now with Gregory Zuckerman. All right, I've got him now. Gregory Zuckman. I'm holding the book up in front of the camera for those of you watching on YouTube or wherever. Congratulations. What a very important book. Thank you for talking to me today.
Great to be here, and thanks very much. Yeah.
The inside story of the life or death race for a COVID-19 vaccine. You're the right guy to write this because you're a journalist, you're a business journalist, and I think now you're a science journalist in that you're certainly covering and talking about scientists for the layperson, for the average person. And that's good. I mean, how do you bring all of that experience to this issue?
So all my writing is through the people. My kind of approach is a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, meaning these are complex stuff. I write about complex stuff, and I'm an outsider. I'm not a scientist. I don't come from that world. I probably got maybe B- in bio kind of thing.
No.
I hired a PhD to help me with this project. And basically, my idea is if I can tell the story through the people, and they are fascinating, really interesting, quirky, stubborn scientists, researchers, executives, difficult people, competitive people, jealous people. I find them just interesting and fascinating. And they're the ones who saved the world. So, the question is, why was it these people? It shouldn't have been these people. It should have been like Merck and all the giants, and it wasn't. So that's sort of what drives my book.
Well, I want to ask you, it's a great book and written from the perspective of all those people, as you said, all these different characters in this book that all matter to history so much. And I'm definitely going to get you to talk to at least about a couple of them. But I just want to ask like a general question, because you explain this and how things work, but to help kind of calm people and I'm not going to even call it a conspiracy theory, but when we talk about the pharmaceutical industry and you write about how, the profits for vaccines are far usually lower than the profits for other treatments and so on, it caused me to go look up the top 10 like drugs, over the counter drugs, much less prescription drugs. And so it's so easy. And this can take 30 seconds to set up, but an important question. So easy to demonize the pharmaceutical industry. All of us lefty, anti-corporate, anti-capitalist types like me, so easy to do it there. But even easier, I think, for a more conspiracy-minded person that thinks they're just in it for the money. But the truth about the pharmaceutical companies is, if you look at it from their point of view, they want to make as much money as possible. The worst thing they could do is make a drug that would have terrible side effects or kill people. And that has happened in the past. They really don't want to do that, but they still want to make a drug, or in this case, a vaccine that's going to make money. Can you just explain to me what the interests are and the motivations for the drug companies, much less the vaccine makers, which I know are not the same always?
Yeah, it's a great question. So just to take a step back, I'm a journalist. I'm an investigative reporter. So I come at this skeptically, maybe even cynically, and I've written my share about biotech companies that mislead investors, mislead customers. I've written recently about some bad ones. So I'm not naive coming into this thing, but the average researcher, the average scientist working in the bowels of these basements of the labs of small companies, medium-sized companies, and large companies too, they are not political. They are motivated by glory and saving lives and making money. But they're not out to hurt. And listen, you got to have some percentage of any industry, my industry as well, which does things the wrong way and doesn't do things properly. But I was very reassured spending, I've spoken to hundreds of people behind these vaccines. We're talking researchers, scientists, investors, executives, etc. And yeah, you could say they wanted to get rich, but a lot of it was just they wanted glory and fame and to save lives. They really are motivated to help, and they're not political. That's another thing that was reassuring. There's this phrase that I kept hearing when you that scientists say, when you mix science and politics, you get politics, meaning they try to stay away from the politics. And there are Republicans, Democrats, people in these labs working hard, but they didn't let the politics affect them. So it was reassuring for me.
Yeah, for sure. And it's got to be really frustrating for you to hear all of the conspiracies and the misinformation, given the fact that you covered this from start to finish, the development of it. One of the issues that gets mentioned a lot is this is brand new. I don't trust it. You go in depth in this to talk about the history of the research that has gone into development of these vaccines. And the other one, if you want to throw it in there, is it happened. They developed it too fast. You make a point that I think the fastest vaccine ever developed was like 4 years. The average is 10 years. They got this done in 1 year. So we can't trust it. It can't be real. Take those.
Listen, I would feel the same way if I didn't know as much as I do and hadn't spent all this time, last year and a half, just buried myself in the work of this. I'd be kind of concerned too. mRNA, which is the key behind the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, had never been proven before 2020. So, hey, it's new. Why am I taking this? They're rushing this. And what's reassuring is the fact that, well, yeah, they didn't know, but they had a pretty good idea going into 2020 that this approach would work. And why did they? Because they literally had spent decades working on it. And I start going back to 1990, where there's this researcher in Wisconsin who's working with children with genetic defects. And he says, you know what? It's not working. What we're doing right now. Let's try this mRNA. And mRNA is just this natural molecule. We all have it in us. It transports the instructions from the DNA into the cell to create proteins, everything we need. So it's always been there. It's always been helpful. And the scientists always wanted to create it in a lab to give instructions to the body. The problem is it's really unstable. It gets chopped up within moments by the cell's enzymes. And it's kind of ironic because one of the criticisms that people are worried about these vaccines is, well, this mRNA is going to affect my DNA. It's going to stay in my body. No, it doesn't. It gets chopped up so quickly. That's why no one really wanted to work with it for decades. And yet some stubborn scientists I write about, they kept at it. They kept perfecting it. They kept working on it. So all the more reasons to be reassured by these approaches. And yeah, I was a little wary about how fast it was, but it wasn't fast. It was years of really interesting, courageous, remarkable work that went into this stuff.
Just another somewhat general point. Use anything from the book if you want to illustrate it, but the investments into these drugs. You mentioned BioNTech. That's really more probably the industry to talk about or cover than pharmaceuticals, which is a more broad term, I suppose. But you can, off the top of my head, or just doing a little bit of research, reading your book, of course, too, how drugs, in this case vaccines, get funded generally. They generally get funded by governments, by individual investors, venture capitalists, by super wealthy people who are philanthropists who might, like Bill Gates and his group. How do these vaccines, specifically, not drugs in general, but vaccines attract investment, and how specifically did these ones get paid for, the development research?
So I'm going to say yes to all of those. You need all of that money and support and help. What's really interesting is that until this last year, vaccines were kind of a loser business. No one really wanted to be in vaccines if you were a big drug company. You've got major companies that make major vaccines, Merck and others, but it takes years of work. It's not clear it ever pays off. And even when it does, there's just so much you can charge for a vaccine. Whereas a drug like a statin, I take a statin every day. You don't take a vaccine every day. It's every, once in a blue moon every year or something. So until this past year, the big guys didn't really want to get involved in the vaccine business. And that helps explain why it took Moderna and BioNTech, Novavax, these companies you never really heard of, to create the vaccines that we depend on. Pfizer came in, but they weren't a vaccine giant either. And they were more kind of in the testing and the trials and manufacturing. BioNTech's the one who developed it. So vaccines weren't a popular business. You don't make that much money on it. It's not clear why you'd want to go into it. It took sort of these outsiders. And yeah, as you suggest, you need help from everywhere. You need investors that will plow money into a company like Moderna without any guarantee of a payout. So in some ways, big bad pharma helped us. So did big bad Wall Street.
Yeah, exactly. Plenty to demonize about them. I mean, you're not even being cynical, but it's just a dumb take. It's just a narrow-minded take to simply demonize everybody and everything when there are often good outcomes. One of the other things that just gets said all the time is, and this is a convincing one, that pharmaceutical companies don't want to develop cures because they make so much more money off treatment. People always say that about cancer. But we have an example. This is not a cure, a vaccine, but it certainly goes a long way to preventing the illness or making it sicker. So it's that you can't have both those be true, I guess. And I don't know if you need to comment on that, but.
Can one be skeptical of big pharma? For sure. I think it's important. Be skeptical of Wall Street. That's what I do for a living. But also be open to the fact that there are hardworking, dedicated researchers. There are people within the government that I've talked to that could make so much more money leaving those government labs and going into private industry. And they're 70 and they're 80, literally coming into the lab. They're just doing it because it's a challenge for them. I mean, there's selfishness involved too. They find it intellectually stimulating. There's a reason why they're still healthy and 70 and 80, putting on these white lab clubs and going into the labs. They enjoy it. So good for them. But to think that they're out to hurt us in any way, I think it's a little bit too skeptical and cynical.
Greg, this book is a really great read because of obviously the way you wrote it and all the characters. There's also drama involved. And so in our discussion right now, I'd love for you to pick maybe there's also a lot of losers. You talk about the losers, the companies and scientists who didn't win, who are still probably trying to develop vaccines, successful ones that can get approved. But take me inside some of the drama that you discovered while researching and writing this book.
Sure. First, I'll tell you about a loser, and then I'll tell you about some drama that I write about. And eventually, they might succeed. There's a company called Novavax. And Novavax, for years, was trying every vaccine possible. You name it. Any virus, any illness, AIDS, RSV. I can go down the whole list. They made vaccines. They didn't work. And we're talking this going into 2020, they were really in trouble. Employees were sending resumes out. They only had about a few months left of cash to keep going. The stock was at $3-4 a share. But they had this stubborn self-confidence that they were doing good work. And for a guy like me, I sort of dismiss a company like that. Oh, they've been trying for years. A lot of us do. The stock's at $3. But there are dedicated researchers that I write about them who could have left, and they just believe in what they're doing. And they were plowing away. This little company in Maryland, and they said, we're going to try to build this COVID-19 vaccine. And it looks really good. It hasn't been approved yet. In the next few months, I think it will. But I think they're going to go from a loser to a winner. And in terms of the drama, I was just struck by how Moderna, as recently as May of 2020, it wasn't clear whether they were actually going to be able to produce these vaccines. Not because they didn't believe in their approach. They had a really effective vaccine. They didn't have the money, though, to manufacture them. And they were feeling desperation. They were despondent because they personally were being affected by it. I'm thinking of one executive who had a family member who died of COVID. And can you imagine that they think they've got a vaccine? They produced a vaccine that could save lives, and yet they've got no money to produce it. And they went out everywhere. They went to the government. They went to the Gates Foundation. They went to Merck and they said, hey, let's team up just like Pfizer and BioNTech have teamed up. And no one wanted to work with them. And eventually they raised enough money from investors willing to roll the dice on them. But it could have gone any other way. So we have to be thankful. We got very lucky in a lot of ways, too, with this virus.
Yeah, I got that. You're looking at a man with the Moderna smoothie running through his body. I don't know how much strength it still has, but I'll take as many shots as they want to give me because and I think that's a really important part of reading your book and journalism about this is it calms you. It calms you knowing how this stuff works. You explain to us from a journalistic point of view how these vaccines are developed and the people who are developing them, who are not part of the Legion of Doom. I don't know if you're too young for Super Friends. I don't know. But I mean, these are real people. Tell me about these real people who are working on these. These are some real life nerds.
They're nerds and they're quirky, but they're also difficult sometimes to deal with too. They're envious. They're competitive. They're ambitious. They're fascinating. At least to me, they were. So like Stefan Bancel, he runs Moderna. he rode his employees so hard, especially in the early days. They were literally collapsing at home, in the office, unconscious, having to take to hospitals. He pushed them really hard. He's a little bit like a Steve Jobs kind of character. And in his defense, he had this vision. He's like, guys, we've got this mRNA approach. It's going to save the world. He literally told his employees, there's going to be some crisis someday, and we're going to be the company to step up. And no one believed him. They all thought he was like an Elizabeth Holmes kind of person, where he was exaggerating and he was raising all this money, and they were very secretive, and people were suspicious of that. And in his view, he didn't want to share the secret sauce. So yeah, the drama behind the scenes and the people, I just find really fascinating. A lot of immigrants, a lot of persistence, resilience that I personally admire. You know, I do these books in some ways selfishly to learn from these characters and to tell their stories to the world. And I just found the drama and the characters to really be surprising in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And you also talk about that a lot of, even this isn't as much your, I don't think, opinion or point of view, but a lot of the scientists, researchers, and even investors say this, and foreigners as well, say this could only have been developed in America. And it's, you know, all other nations have developed vaccines, Russia and China, I think, right? And we could talk about their efficacy and their, the regulations surrounding them and so on. But the United States really did develop the three, I guess, major vaccines that have been most effective and exported, probably arguably not enough around the world. But how does that work? Like, how does the, Operation Warp Speed is an attempt to fund this to very, very fast by the federal government under Donald Trump as president. I always like to say, listen, any president, all presidents would have done the same thing. This is completely probably out of his hands. He was probably like, yes, if anything, anyway, it doesn't matter about the politics, but why America, and how did Operation Warp Speed work?
Yeah, so one can criticize the Trump administration for its activities, its preparedness before the pandemic. You could criticize them for other things, how maybe the vaccines were rolled out early on. But you have to give them credit for Operation Warp Speed. And basically, it was a push to fund different vaccine approaches. It was almost like a portfolio approach. And they backed two of the mRNA ones, that's the Pfizer one and the Moderna one, two of these, it's called adenovirus, another approach, which I write about in my book. And that ended up being the J&J vaccine, which is very effective too, as well as one in the UK, AstraZeneca and Oxford, which is good. And then a protein one, which this little company I talked about called Novavax. So it was a smart idea to have this portfolio approach. No one in the administration or elsewhere thought that so many of these vaccines would be so effective, but they wanted to hedge their bets to some extent. And they wrote big checks. And it wasn't just the checks. It was resources that were involved, closing bridges and transporting supplies when it was necessary. So you have to give credit where credit's due. I have a lot of criticisms as well for how things were handled, but that was helpful. So, and when you talk to like the CEOs of these companies who are immigrants, like Albert Bourla, who's from Greece, and Stefan Bensel, who's from France, and Uğur Şahin, who's in Germany and originally from Turkey, they all say that America, it needed to be done in America. The production, the capital raising, we still have investors willing to write checks for unproven companies who just have dreams, and you cannot get that kind of money elsewhere. So yeah, I think we need to, I'm not some big rah-rah, go America, we crush everybody. Jingo is the kind of thing. But yeah, we have to also appreciate, we have some great things going on here as well. We've got these researchers and creativity that I've got to know with the researchers behind these vaccines when I wrote this book. So I've been impressed by that as well.
How about just the kind of maybe the politics around cures or around diseases? Like people, this is a very unpopular thing to say, but a lot of researchers will say, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and the campaign around breast cancer has been wildly effective. And anybody who looks into it knows there's some controversy around the Susan G. Komen Foundation and so on. But what people will say is it's not even, I think, the leading killer of women, yet it gets the most attention. And because it gets so much attention, it gets funding. And outside of that, I want to just look at viruses that, are effectively handled with the vaccines and ask, AIDS, you write about this. You look at that, all of the controversy around that. It's a gay men's disease. It's transmitted through sex and all of the shit around that, versus everybody all around the world is getting COVID. It's nobody's fault. It's just for breathing. And, the priorities of investing into a disease, or in this case, a virus, including influenza? How does that kind of work with governments, much less with investors?
Yeah, so if there's money to be made, if there's a big market, then investors don't really care. So that's in some ways reassuring, I guess. It's all about the green. Yeah, HIV, and there's a reason I write about the chase for an HIV vaccine in my book, and I do it largely because I find it fascinating and interesting, and there's a lot of drama there as well. But it didn't lead to a vaccine. But and I didn't know this myself, and I thought people should know this. It did lead to other things. It led to an understanding of the immune system. It led to some of these approaches. Again, the J&J one actually is based on an approach that was first developed for AIDS. It hasn't worked for AIDS. There's a Boston scientist, a researcher I write about, Dan Baruch, and his whole life has been dedicated to finding a vaccine for AIDS. And he's been failing his whole life. And yet that same approach he developed is working for the J&J for COVID. So when I talk to the scientists, they say, Greg, there's no failed drug trials. To people like me on the outside, it looks like a failure. It can be embarrassing. The stock goes down, whatever. People are upset. They learn along the way. They're always learning from their failures. I found kind of impressive. I try to learn from my own failures, and some of those lessons were kind of life lessons to me.
Well, you've learned from your own failures, because during your promotion of the book, your audio and video quality has only gotten better and better, to the point that you're really peaking right here on my podcast. And so it's a very big deal, at least to us. Finally, want to ask you about how you read about how the success of the vaccines can kind of be a model for society, showing how private industry can work with governments around the world. For what end? How can the success here that you read about be a positive model for society? Because we don't see a lot of positive models for society or culture. We fight over everything right now.
We really do. Everything is a matter of debate, and anger is everywhere. I traveled the country for a previous book, and I got to little towns in Oklahoma and Texas, and Louisiana, and North Dakota. It was just eye-opening how much more we have in common than you would think, but we just don't have a chance to interact anymore. Sitting at a bar or restaurant and across from each other. But yeah, in terms of COVID, the government worked hand in hand with these private industries, private companies like Moderna, et cetera, like I've never seen before. And it's a great model of the future, how we can come together focused on a problem, work hand in hand with real urgency. So they are now pivoting to new illnesses and diseases, cancer, malaria, multiple sclerosis. There are things that I don't want to say I'm positive it's going to work, but I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that we could be in a new era of vaccines, thanks to the people I write about in my book. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on them going forward, and fingers crossed.
You mentioned, we don't talk enough, and that's part of the divisiveness. But I also think, just finally here, just want to get your opinion. We're listening to different stories media-wise. Like, I'm listening to you right now. You did a journalistic endeavor into the development of this vaccine, spent a year of your life more on it, have been on it from the beginning. And somebody else is listening to a YouTuber or a cable newser that's, giving them a minute or two and telling them the reason they're in the situation they are in their life and their community is because of this or that. We're siloed off. I just want to get your take if you think that that's also a huge part of the story we get told wherever we live by our favorite media star.
It's sad for me. It's frustrating for me as a citizen, as a journalist. We take it seriously. People dismiss mainstream media. I think I can speak for my colleagues. I'm up at night worried that I made a mistake. The worst thing you could do, I'm at the Wall Street Journal, and I think we're better than most. And I'm talking my book here. I'm not objective, but the worst thing you could do at the Wall Street Journal is to make an error and have a correction. You'd be surprised. Like, you could be on page one and be some superstar, but if you have too many corrections in the paper, you're going to get a talking to, and you're going to maybe lose your job. So we're up at night, even just spelling someone's name. I worry. I'm an awful speller. I'm probably dyslexic. So we do worry about this kind of stuff, and yet people dismiss the work of the mainstream media. And I'm not going to say there aren't other places, and there aren't journalists with progressive or other kind of even right-wing agendas. There are agendas out there, but many of us are trying our best, and we're trying to provide the information. And yes, unfortunately, people are turning to YouTube and some friend of a friend for information and rumors, and we're too cynical and skeptical of each other. And we should be picking up a newspaper. But, that I work for newspapers, so I guess maybe I'm not objective.
Newspaper. Yeah. I mean, listen, I could criticize your employer, anybody can, any giant corporate media, but certainly it's true of what you said about the news end of the Wall Street Journal, and that you have editors you have to report to. I mean, that's a super important thing. And if you get something wrong, if you make a source up, if you plagiarize, it's over for Greg Zuckerman. It's done. You have to learn how to be a wildcatter, which you know all about that.
I don't know what I would do, my friend. Yeah. So, right. It keeps you up at night as a journalist. And, again, I can't speak for everyone, but I know my colleagues and I, we work really hard to get it right. And we hope people appreciate that at some point.
I certainly do, and especially with this book, which is outside your day job, I guess. A Shot to Save the World, the inside story to the life or death race for a COVID-19 vaccine. Congratulations, Greg. I really appreciate you joining me and look forward to talking to you again about this book and the rest of your work. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for taking the time.
All right. G. Zuckerman on Twitter, at Gregory Zuckerman. Get the book, A Shot to Save the World. Very important journalism here, and I hope you learned something from that conversation. I certainly have, as well as for reading the book and preparing to talk with him. And now I want to get to a duo that I invited on the show. Gabby Goldstein is the co-founder of Sister District, whose mission stated is to build progressive power in state legislatures. And she is also a lawyer, a bioethics lawyer, and health policy researcher. She is got a PhD in health policy as well, senior vice president for strategic initiatives at Sister District, and just a super smart woman. And very happy to have her joining me, as well as Amanda Litman, who has been on the show a couple of times before. I love Amanda and her work at Run for Something. They have a podcast as well, the Run for Something podcast, runforsomething.net, an awesome organization helping progressive candidates get elected around the country, doing great work. Sister District, Run for Something, Amanda Litman, Gabby Goldstein. Let's talk about what's going to happen on Tuesday in Virginia and around the country right now. Okay, here we go. I've got them. I'm very excited and a little intimidated because these two humans are super smart, super passionate, hardworking, and I'm very excited to be talking to both of you. Gabby, Amanda, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So you guys are both co-founders and leading very important organizations, and this is the most important. What is it? How do we look at it? 72 hours, 3 days. We're talking on Friday, but I'm hoping to share clips and all the way up till Election Day. So Gabby, what is the most important thing you're asking people as you look? You guys are heavily focused on Virginia. Let me just ask you first. Why is Virginia so important?
Virginia is really important as a national bellwether for what we might be looking at next year in the national midterms. Virginia and a small handful of other states hold their state leg elections and gubernatorial elections during the odd year, not off year. There's no off years in politics. There's always elections every year. But because Virginia holds their elections the year before the midterms or the year before the presidential, it often indicates what may be coming down the road in terms of politics. But Virginia is also really important in itself. In just the 2 years that Democrats have controlled the state as a blue trifecta, they have raised the minimum wage, rolled back abortion restrictions, expanded voting rights, made Election Day a holiday, all of this great stuff, which is really building the case towards a progressive federalism, the power that states have. And so Virginia is a really important blueprint. It's not an outlier. It's a blueprint for how states can lead on these issues that impact our daily lives. So really important that we hold this majority and keep Virginia blue.
And it's really razor thin majority. So, Amanda, I know you've got 271 candidates in 23 states that you're supporting. Your organization is just kicking ass since you started it. But could you add anything to what Gabby and Sister District is doing specifically about Virginia?
Yes, I think what's happening in Virginia is a chance for Democrats to prove not just that we care about flipping seats, but that we care about holding majorities. You know, in the last 2.5 years since we won the state house back in 2019, they have done things like abolish the death penalty, expand voting rights, pass ambitious climate legislation. Now we have a chance to really cement that and ensure that Virginia is a blue state, not just for a couple years, but in perpetuity. Because we know that if Glenn Youngkin wins the governorship and if Republicans take back control of the state legislature, they are going to make it so much harder for Democrats to win in the future, in part by undoing some of the incredible progress we've made. So I think it's critically important. And we have so many other elections that we are really excited about. You know, there are school board elections in Virginia and city council elections there. And as you said, in 20 or 30 other states across the country, a lot of people get a chance to vote this week. And we're really excited about the outcomes.
So scare me now. Now scare us, Gabby. What if Democrats lose control of Virginia? Amanda just touched on, you know, the possibilities and how it would be really hard to get back control. I mean, I don't know how accurate this negative ad from, you know, Terry McAuliffe is, but apparently Glenn Youngkin is talking about banning some books. I had a book banning conversation yesterday with a historian, and it was very upsetting because it wasn't actually history. Scare me, Gabby.
I know. Imagine talking about banning Beloved. Like, it's just wild and crazy. But these are really tight races. I mean, Terry McAuliffe is the former governor. In Virginia, there's this, you know, kind of quirky system where you can only be governor for one term consecutively. You can be governor later if you run again years later, but you can only hold it for one term at a time. So Terry has been governor. You couldn't ask for someone with higher name recognition than Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. But this is essentially a tied race with a really unknown Republican. So that just shows that this is really going to be a photo finish for the governorship, and that reverberates all the way down to these state legislative races. So these are going to be tight races, field margin races, where these last few days are going to make a really big difference in terms of how many voters we can actually talk to and turn out.
But what about the difference it makes in people's lives? I mean, you're a health policy expert. I mean, from, you know, Medicaid to other healthcare issues to women's reproductive rights and abortion, which is a huge issue and close issue there in Virginia. You know, to subsidizing Liberty University. Sorry. Okay. So, you know, what I mean, specifically, what are you worried about? What do we lose?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing across the country is that more and more issues that impact our daily lives are falling to states to decide. And that includes repro, that includes access to healthcare, that includes whether the water is safe to drink. These are not issues that are going to be decided by the federal government. These are issues that are going to be decided by our state legislatures. And so that's what's coming for us if we don't build power at this level of the ballot. Right. You know, Texas is a great example of how Republican-controlled states are using the power that states have to curb the rights of pregnant people who are, you know, would be seeking an abortion and all the rest. Our states are growing in power. And so we're coming from behind. I always say that progressives are tardy to the party when it comes to paying attention to the power of the states. But we got to catch up and we got to invest for the long haul.
Amanda, it is Halloween weekend. Do you have any other scary concerns about what happens if we lose Virginia or any of the other places, states and candidates that you're supporting?
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that no one election cycle happens in a vacuum. So the work that we are doing right now in Virginia and in the Atlanta City Council race and the Cleveland City Council race and the school boards in Texas, all of it lays the groundwork for what happens in 2022 and 2024 and beyond. You know, the voter contact that you do now when you're knocking doors in Pittsburgh helps the Senate candidate in next year. So I am really nervous that if we continue to underinvest in these races, that people aren't out there knocking doors in these local campaigns, that we are setting ourselves up a year or two out from bigger losses to come. And we've seen that when these Republicans win these local elections, they use that power to make it harder for us in the future.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I mean, we can talk about kind of the different tactics and techniques and off-year elections, which one of you already said is a terrible term, and I appreciate that.
No such thing. No such thing.
Right. There are elections. You're both telling me that every year we have elections in states? Because
Not just that, Pete. Basically, every week out of the year, there's a school board election happening. 52 weeks out of the year. Maybe 51. I don't think there are ones around Christmas. But basically, 51 out of 52 weeks of the year, there's a school board election happening somewhere. Isn't that crazy?
Well, I don't think in our lifetimes that the school board has ever been as important as it is right now, given the fight in my town. But Amanda, I told you I was thinking about running for town council at one point when I got recruited by the local Democrats after 2 women had to drop out for different reasons. I was like, okay, they couldn't get my name on the ballot. And it was like 6 weeks before I decided not to do it. But I'm still considering a run in the future. But I did learn a lot in my exploratory, few weeks. And the big question for both of you, to me, is turning out who are we trying to turn out? Who are your organizations targeting? Especially I feel like young people, they come out on the presidential year elections a lot more. They're more likely to be paying attention. But what is the challenge, and who are your organizations targeting to really try to get to turn out on Tuesday and subsequent elections? Why don't you go first, Gabby, Sister District?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I want to say is a huge shout out to the organizations on the ground doing year-round organizing work in their communities to make the case, to draw the lines for folks about the issues that people care about, to why voting matters. And that work is the critical bedrock to the electoral work that comes in during an election campaign.
Can I just jump in and say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was so apathetic in my local community that I didn't even realize some of the organizations you're talking about existed. So sometimes people think, well, I'm going to go create this organization. Before you do that, look to find out. It's not hard to find them and join up. Sorry, Gabby, to jump in there, but.
That's exactly right. And so in Virginia, just as an example, I want to give a huge shout out to New Virginia Majority, which is an incredible year-round power building organization that has organizers year-round all across the state of Virginia talking to folks, not just as voters, but talking to people as people about why the issues they care about will only come true if we vote the right people into power. So that's all prior to an election coming in, a campaign coming in and turning people out and getting folks riled up and ready to vote. We need both, right? And so we need those year-round power building organizations as well as really strong campaigns to come in and finish the job, so to speak.
But Amanda, I only think about my drinking water around October. It's the only time I only care about stuff that is super consequential to my family, my home, my environment, my daughter's future around October. What would you add to Gabby about these organizations and specifically, what we all need to do to pay more attention to be able to compete and not miss out the rest of the year, much less even in October?
I think Gabby's right. These local grassroots organizations that are doing community organizing, that are knocking doors, engaging with voters, doing events that might not seem like they're political in nature, happy hours and lunches and community service work, all of that is in service ultimately of winning and building power. And they exist, as you said, Pete, everywhere. And they are everything from statewide to neighborhood associations. They're really fun. I mean, I think especially right now when people can feel really disconnected from your neighbors, you can feel really lonely, especially for folks who maybe are in their 20s or 30s and just moved somewhere, have felt really transient, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah.
This is a way to really plug in and connect. So that when election comes around and that when it's time to, as you say, in October, care about your drinking water, there's relationships there that you can start to leverage on behalf of winning elections. They do amazing work, and the candidates that Run for Something works with build on top of that. They create sort of the focal point. So the community organizing work, happens year round, and then the candidate comes in and is able to give that community organizing a focus, an end date, a center. Then they get to govern, and hopefully in partnership with those community organizers they work with to get there.
Yeah, I definitely getting involved locally. You said it was fun. I have so many new friends that people, I thought everybody around me was crazy, and I thought I was losing it as well. And then I found all these amazing people working on, specifically the local progressive organizations, but specifically a whole bunch of other parents working on. I mean, we got these crazy people screaming about critical race theory. They got rid of our superintendent, so we organized. And we're doing, we're talking, and somebody's like, the other day, the guy who kind of has been running it, he's like, hey, do you guys want to come over? My band is playing. And we're like, oh my God, I have all these new friends. It's fun. It really can be. So it's not all work. Okay, final question for both of you here. In these last 72 hours, what do you want people to do? I mean, I started with this and I want to end with it. And in this last few days, what do you want people to do? Because I kind of feel like no matter what, if you just put your name out there. By the way, if I hear one more Democrat complaining that they're getting too many emails, really? You're getting too many emails and texts? That's like the stakes. I mean, come on. So what can we do outside of signing up right now to get organized? Gabby?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that folks can do for Virginia right now, if you're in Virginia, go knock some doors. But if you're not in Virginia, and most people are not in Virginia, sign up for a phone bank. Sister District is running phone banks every day between now and the election day. And the great thing about that is that it clears up the local folks to just be out on the doors. So it's really a huge extension arm for the campaigns that we're working with, which are the tightest races in the entire state, to be able to focus their local energy on being out on the doors. And we can all do that by signing up for a shift. They're just an hour long. We have some really fun ones coming up with comedian David Cross and the Pod Save America guys. I know Run for Something is one of our partners for our national phone banks. And they're really fun, and a little goes a long way, and it's going to make a huge difference down the stretch.
Amanda, explain phone banking and why it's so much fun.
Phone banking is picking up the phone and calling voters and making sure, especially in this final weekend, that they know when and where and how to vote. You're not doing persuasion calls at this point. You're not getting into fights about the issues. You're just making sure people have the information they need. And if you don't live in Virginia and you really do want to be out there knocking doors, there is almost certainly a candidate you can work with in your community. If you go to runforsomething.net/map, you can search exactly where you are, find folks running campaigns, and go knock doors. It's kind of like trick-or-treating, but instead of getting candy, you are giving voters the information they need to show up at the polls.
Is it weird if you knock on doors and you bring people candy?
Do it. It could make it fun. It's a nice little trick-or-treat in reverse.
You guys are doing heroic work. Your organizations that you co-founded are amazing, and I'm just so honored to get to talk to you and get the word out. I really appreciate you joining me, and I know you got to get back to work. Thank you very much. Good luck, and let me know if there's anything else me or the folks listening and watching can do. Thanks, Gabby. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
There you go, Gabby Goldstein and Amanda Litman. Run for Something Sister District, two awesome organizations helping elect amazing, great, well-qualified, often young and diverse group of progressive candidates to all levels of government across the country. I highly recommend that you get in touch with them, volunteer, donate, phone bank, whatever you can. Okay, that's all I've got for you on today's episode of Stand Up. And I've got a whole lot of great guests, though, scheduled to join me this week. It's going to be another great week. I can tell you that already. Okay, sorry about that. You guys are the best. I appreciate you. I love you. I hope that you'll sign up for a subscription if you haven't already. StandUpWithPete.com. Go right now. John Carroll, would you sing us out? Thank you, my friend.
We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.